Welcome to the Week 2 SCPI Basketball Podcast. Been a long break between the first one and the second one. First one was from before the holidays, but now we're back and in full swing. Keith, we just both took in a great game. Taft falls at home to El Camino Real. Eddie Egan with a huge game for the Conquistadors. That was a great one. As always, though, we'll get into the top 10 game balls and picks. But first, let's just quickly touch on this game. Great game, and who would have thought the West Valley League, I mean, it's stacked. Everyone knows Birmingham, everyone knows Taft, but it looks like El Camino Real's legit as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Taft coming in this game, they had a lot of momentum, and especially playing at home. We actually saw the JV game go down to the wire between those two teams. So clearly those teams, they're going to be competitors for years on. But Taft getting upset at home, who would have thunk?
Not me. Great game, though, and again, a shout-out to Eddie Egan. He played really well. All right, into our top 10. 10, we have Gardena. 9, University. They very tough week for them. Fairfax and Westchester lost both those games, but they won a nice game against Crossroads, and that is, of course, Shaquille O'Neal's son's team, Sharif, so that's a great win for them. 8, Washington Prep. 7, Narbonne. And with the Marine League, with Washington Prep, with Gardena, that's going to figure, those rankings, they'll get figured out when the Marine League play really gets going, and tonight was the first night of that. 6, El Camino Real. So we just saw them. Keith, let's break that down. Eddie Egan was great. Number 23, I thought was excellent for them as well, shooter off the bench. And even Kobe White, the football player who was on our show, gave ECR some great minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved Egan and just his physicality and the ability to go up to the hoop. And, even those second chance opportunities, he never let a single ball go by the wayside. He was always going for the extra rebound. Great play from him all night.
Yeah, and he played a little banged up, too. The only time he left the game was due to an injury, and it looked like he might have re-aggravated it later on, but he stayed in and fought through, so that was impressive. 5, Crenshaw. They've looked really, really good so far this year. I believe they're 14-5 thus far. Birmingham 4, I want to touch on them, another West Valley League team. So I saw them before the holidays in November. Everyone knows Devonair Detrieve is really, really good, but now they've added a Bishop Alemany transfer and then this 6'11", almost 7-foot center named Christian Coloco, who is nasty. And wow. I just watched them play and beat Granada Hills. They were up 20-2 in that game. They're solid. They're a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, we were talking about this, in the preseason podcast, just about how Birmingham, all they are essentially at that time was Devonair Detrieve, and now they added some big guys. That's clutch for a team to have, a rebounding presence down low, a guy that you can rely on scoring. We know Detrieve, he can score each and every way, but having that 6'11" guy, it just makes them a different team. And, placing them as high as they are right now, even though the record doesn't really show it, I think that, come playoff time, they'll really show what they're capable of.
Yeah, they're 7-8 right now, but they've added these guys since January 1st. And remember, we were just at Taft and El Camino Real. Where's the big guy for either of those teams? They don't really have a traditional great big guy. At 3, Taft, so we'll have to switch the rankings a little bit because El Camino Real beat them. But your impressions of Taft after tonight?
Well, here's what I'll say. Kihei Clark, unbelievable talent. We saw him in the first half. He was getting a lot of buckets, especially, the 2-pointers, the layups, those types of things. He's always solid driving to the hoop. But 3-point land, he wasn't really hitting them in the first half, but come in the second half, he was great, being able to distribute the ball as well. But some turnovers really cost him. Transition play from ECR was the key tonight against Taft as well. In the second half, really, it was turnovers, but more so than that, it was fouls. They had 5 fouls at the end of the third quarter, and because of that, they couldn't really drive inside, and they couldn't play as physical as they wanted on the defensive end. So foul trouble, a really sloppy game from Taft overall.
Yeah, Kihei Clark, usually the kind of the keep it in control point guard. Might not do a lot of scoring, but is a great assister, and we saw some of that tonight. But you're right, he did have some crucial turnovers that hurt them, and he wasn't the reason they lost. Without him, they would have lost by more. He was great, but he did make some mistakes. And then into the top 2 Fairfax, 1 Westchester. Keith, you had a chance to check both these teams out at the Torrey Pines Holiday Classic down in San Diego. Thoughts on those teams?
Yes, well, both of them are extremely talented. Obviously, the top 2 teams in the section by far. But personally, I think Fairfax is actually the better of the two, just considering their all-around guard play. And a guy who we'll shout out a little bit later, Kirk Smith, the 6'8" forward, which
great.
Really makes them a whole different type of team. Just talking about Westchester, though, they have the size. They probably have the best size in the section, I will say. They're a physical team, and when their guards are playing hot, nobody can beat them. But we saw against Foothills Christian in that game at the Holiday Classic, their guard play really wasn't there. They weren't able to hit their outside shots, and their bigs were getting into foul trouble. They're playing a very sloppy style of basketball. They couldn't contain Tayshaun Cherry as well as the guards from Foothills Christian. So this goes to show you that when Westchester doesn't have all of their components going, they're not as good as people may think. But that said, against some of these LA City section teams, I think they'll dominate simply because they're bigger than everybody else.
Yeah, and Fairfax and Westchester, I mean, they've already played a couple of LA City section teams this year, and they've had no trouble. They play each other Friday. We'll pick that game in a little bit. Time for our game ball segment where we highlight some of the top players in the city section. Got to get out of here, so we'll do this pretty quick. I had Dyson Hughes from University, had a huge 31-point performance against Crossroads in a victory for University on Tuesday. Thought he was exceptional in that game, made a bunch of threes, so he gets the game ball from me. Congrats, Dyson.
Yeah, and we got to talk about Hughes and his ability to hit the three ball. Actually leads the city section right now, according to Max Preps. 53 pointers made, so congrats to him. He's had an unbelievable, whole season shooting from beyond the arc. But a guy I want to highlight, at least my game ball, is Kirk Smith from Fairfax, the 6'8 forward, who maybe plays a little bit inside the arc, mainly inside the arc actually. His ability to play for Fairfax, both on the defensive side of the ball, whether that's blocking shots or getting key stops down low, and also to be a force down low for them. They're usually, they're more of a smaller team. They like to play with a lot of guards. So Kirk Smith, you get a game ball from me. You had a great performance in that Holiday Classic down in San Diego.
There are the game balls. Time for the one pick of the week. It's Fairfax at Westchester. I think I know which way we're both going to go. Obviously, I know which way I'm going to go. Westchester, because I think they're a little bit better than Fairfax, even though Keith disagrees and they're at home. I think that makes the difference.
Well, I'm going to have to go with Fairfax. Kirk Smith, as I mentioned, he's just too dominant. But more so than that, I really like the guard play of Fairfax. I think that if Westchester is able to get this win, I think they're unstoppable in this section.
That's the Week 2 basketball podcast. We'll be here all season long. See you for Week 3. Keith the Mulder, Connor Morissette. See you next time.